In the early hours of a March morning in 1964, a young woman was stabbed to death just steps from her own front door.
It took almost half an hour. She screamed. She was attacked, the killer left, and then he came back to finish it.
And according to the story that made her famous, 38 people watched it happen from their windows in the dark, and not a single one of them lifted a finger to help.
That story changed how we see each other. It rewrote the psychology textbooks. It gave us a chilling new law of human nature.
There was just one problem with it. Almost none of it was true. This is the story of Kitty Genovese, the murder that convinced the world that no one would come to save you, and the quieter, stranger truth that took 50 years to surface.
Her name was Catherine Genovese. Everyone called her Kitty.
She was 28 years old, a bar manager in Queens, New York, driving home after a late shift.
It was around 3:15 in the morning when she parked near her apartment in Kew Gardens, a quiet, leafy neighborhood of brick buildings and small shops.
The kind of place where nothing happens. She never made it to the door. A man named Winston Mosley had followed her, 29 years old.
Married. A father. A machine operator with no criminal record. The sort of man you would never look at twice.
Later, he would tell police something almost too cold to repeat, that he had gone out that night simply to kill a woman. Any woman.
He caught her in the open and stabbed her in the back. She screamed into the empty street, and for a moment the street answered.
A window opened. A neighbor shouted down into the dark, and Mosley, startled, turned and walked away. Think about that moment.
She was hurt, but she was alive. A voice from a window had been enough to scare a killer off.
If the night had ended there, you would never have heard her name. But it didn't end there.
Bleeding, she staggered around the side of the building, out of the streetlight into a small back hallway, out of sight of every window that might have helped her.
And about 10 minutes later, Mosley did something most attackers never do. He came back. He searched the row of doorways until he found her.
And in that hidden hallway where no one could see, he attacked her again. And this time, he did not stop.
By the time an ambulance reached Kew Gardens, Kitty Genovese was dying. She would not survive the trip to the hospital.
She was 28 years old. 2 weeks later, the New York Times published an article that would outlive everyone involved.
The headline was devastating in its simplicity. 37 people who saw a murder and didn't call the police.
In the text, the number grew to 38.
38 respectable, ordinary citizens, the paper said, who stood at their windows and watched a woman be killed in 3 separate attacks across 35 minutes, and did nothing.
One neighbor asked why, supposedly gave an answer that would haunt the century. I didn't want to get involved. The story detonated.
It was reprinted, broadcast, preached from pulpits as proof that the modern city had rotted the human soul.
The paper's own editor turned it into a book, and it traveled somewhere far more permanent than any front page. It went into the science.
'Cause 2 young psychologists, John Darley and Latane, read about Kitty Genovese and asked a question nobody had asked before.
What if those 38 people weren't monsters?
What if they were normal? And the horror was that being in a crowd is exactly what stopped them. So they built experiments to test it.
In one, a student hears another student in another room begin to choke and gasp through an intercom. The sounds of a seizure.
When the subject believed they were the only one listening, 85% rushed to help.
But when they believed 4 other people could hear it too, help collapsed. Barely a third moved at all.
In another, they pumped smoke into a room while people filled out a questionnaire. Alone,
Most people reported it within minutes.
But seated beside two strangers who simply sat there and did nothing. Most said nothing and let the smoke fill the room around them.
They had found something real. They called it the diffusion of responsibility.
The more people who are present, the less any single person feels that saving you is their job. The crowd doesn't make you safer.
The crowd, they argued, can make you invisible.
And Kitty Genovese became the human face of that idea, the patron saint of everyone who was ever ignored. 38 witnesses.
The number was taught to millions. It became one of the most famous facts in all of psychology. It was also wrong.
Decades later, journalists and researchers went back. They pulled the court records, the trial testimony, the police accounts.
They tracked down the people who had actually been there that night, and the famous story began to come apart in their hands.
Start with the witnesses. There was no row of 38 people calmly watching a murder.
The two attacks happened in two different places. One on the street, one hidden in a back hallway.
Because of the layout of the buildings, almost no one could have seen both. In fact, it appears no one saw the whole thing at all.
A handful of people heard fragments, a scream, a scuffle in the night, and most of them assumed what tired people assume at 3 in the morning. A drunken argument, a lover's quarrel, bar patrons heading home.
Then there's the claim that no one called. That, too, falls apart. The records suggest calls were made, including after the second attack.
The clean, terrible image of 38 silent phones simply did not match what happened.
And then there is the single fact that breaks the entire story in half.
Kitty Genovese did not die alone in an empty hallway, ignored by the world.
A neighbor named Sophia Ferrar, her friend, heard that something was wrong and ran out of her apartment, down into that dark hallway, toward a screaming she did not understand and a danger she could not see.
She found Kitty gravely hurt on the floor.
And she gathered her up and held her, so that in those last, terrible minutes, Kitty Genovese was not alone and not abandoned.
Someone had come. 38 people did nothing, the story said. Someone did everything. So how did we get the other version?
Years later, a reporter who worked the story was pressed on why the article left out that the witnesses never realized a murder was happening.
The answer he is remembered giving is as honest as it is damning. It would have ruined the story.
In 2016, the New York Times itself printed a correction.
The original reporting, it admitted, had grossly exaggerated the number of witnesses and what they saw.
None of them, it said, had watched the murder unfold. 50 years too late for the woman at the center of it.
Now, here's where it would be easy to draw the wrong lesson. To say, see, the bystander effect was a lie too. Throw it all out.
But that's not true either. And the truth is more interesting. In the laboratory, the effect Darley and Latane found is real.
It has been repeated for decades across thousands of people. Put a person in a crowd of strangers and on average, yes, they hesitate.
Responsibility dissolves. That part holds up. But here is what the famous story got backwards.
When researchers stopped using lab intercoms and started watching real life, hundreds of actual fights and emergencies caught on street cameras around the world, they found something that would have astonished the people who taught us about Kitty Genovese.
In real public danger, somebody almost always steps in. In 9 out of 10 of those real conflicts, at least one bystander intervened.
And the more people who were present, the more likely it became that someone would help. The opposite of the legend.
So the real horror of Kitty Genovese was never that 38 people watched a woman die and felt nothing. The real horror is how badly we wanted to believe they did.
We took the death of a young woman
else is. Everyone except us. We repeated it for 50 years because it confirmed something we already suspected about strangers.
And in doing that, we erased the one person who actually ran toward the screaming. A story can be more powerful than the truth.
It can outrun it, outlive it, and bury the facts so deep that it takes half a century to dig them out.
Kitty Genovese was failed that night, but not by 38 monsters at their windows. She was failed in the end by a better story.
She did not die alone. Someone came. Remember that the next time a story tells you no one would.